My person is my husband, Alec. He came into my life 12 years ago. Right towards the end of the date, he said, I've got one more surprise for you. He said, I need you to close your eyes. And so I closed my eyes and I turned, and there was a firework display just for me. The place that I've chosen is Patagonia. When I landed there, I felt like I'd arrived home. It changed my life completely. I found myself at 39, not flying through the air with the greatest of ease, but getting a hip replacement. And so my treasured thing is my bionic hip. That is what I've chosen.
Welcome back to These Three Things, the podcast that asks which person, which place, and which treasured possession have made a profound impact upon your life and why. My guest today is the bilingual writer, director, and educator, Sara Lewis. In 2008, she made the leap from education to work as a professional creative full-time, spending 8 very happy years as a member of Theatre Nanog, writing, producing, and directing many of their performances. Her freelance work includes writing for television and radio, as well as creating stage musicals for the National Eisteddfod. During lockdown, she was delighted to be commissioned to write a performance piece for Michael Sheen, and her work as a ghostwriter has seen her reach the #1 best-selling list on Amazon. More recently, in a plot twist that nobody, least of all her, saw coming, she became a restaurateur alongside her husband Aled and his business partner Sean, with the opening of Anch, an award-winning sustainable burger restaurant in Cardiff. She says her contribution to the business is just doing all the fun, pretty stuff. She is a proud Valleys girl who spends most of her time living between Aberdare and Penbryn Ceredigion with Aled and her beloved dogs, chipping away at a novel that she promises will be finished soon. It is a great privilege and pleasure of mine to have Sara on today as a guest. Thank you so much for saying yes. I love seeing you. How are you? And let me ask you, how easy was it for you to choose your list?
It was not easy at all. Well, I think the thing was quite easy, but as I'm sure many other people, because I'm so lucky to be surrounded by truly remarkable people, both living and not, it was really tough to find just one person, until it wasn't. And then the place was the same. There are so many places in the world that I could have chosen that are significant to me and magical to me. So I went back to the question that you actually asked me, which was, what's had a profound impact? And so the 3 that I've chosen in the end was quite easy. They are things that had a before and an afterness to them. So yes, in the end, I got there.
Oh, I can't wait. Let's get stuck in. Shall we start with your person? I want to know who have you chosen and why?
So my person is my husband, Alec. Yes. And he came into my life. I'm going to take my specs off because I'll probably cry. He came into my life 12 years ago. And I had recently returned, which you'll hear more about later when I speak about my thing. I'd recently returned from a world tour, a solo trip. And I'd come back to Wales. I had just recently turned 40. And I felt ready at last to actually meet somebody, to meet the right person. And so at the time, I was definitely kind of, open and coming from a place of yes. And so when I got invited to a party in Cardiff, I said yes. And in this party, it was a great party, and I made myself, kind of shuffle up to the bar, and I was approached by um, a yob who whispered something very naughty in my ear. And I turned around to find this man who had, I found out later, had a chipped tooth because it was he'd been playing rugby the week before. And I can remember thinking, who on earth does this yob think he's speaking to? Honestly, within 2 minutes, he had made me belly laugh. And then he started singing to me. And that was the beginning of Aled entering my life. Now, in that initial conversation, I melted a little. It turned out that he was a lot younger than me. So I thought, oh, well, this is a non-starter before we even begin. What on earth could somebody 10 years my junior teach me about life? Because, I was this sassy, well-traveled, wise woman. And it turns out he had quite a lot to teach me, actually. And so he pursued me, and it was really quite sweet. For about 3 months, I kept turning him down whenever he asked me whether I'd go out on a date. I still thought the whole thing was ridiculous, that I should be with somebody so much younger than me. And in the end, I think he just wore me down, and I agreed to one date. And he said, right, okay, well, we arranged, the night that he would come and pick me up. And I quite seriously said, well, you can pick me up from my sister's house because my brother-in-law is a policeman. So, he will be taking down the details of your car, registration, and all of this, poor Dab. And he turned up on time, and he drove me quite a long way with me thinking I was being hilarious, suggesting that he was actually taking me to the remotest spot he could to murder me. I kept making this joke as well. And he ended up taking me to Porthcurry Park, just outside of Barry. And I didn't know that he'd actually been there the night before to kind of, check out the place and, where we were going to sit. And so he brought me down onto Porthcurry Beach. And I don't know, it's a pebble beach. I don't know whether you've been there. And there was an old tree trunk that had obviously washed up years and years before. And he laid down a rug. He brought me a cushion to sit down. Surrounded the rug with candles. And there I sat like the Queen of Sheba to have this, fantastic date. He brought out champagne. He brought out, attention to detail here, a gluten-free picnic. He'd done his work. And I actually had the most brilliant time and just laughed and kept thinking to myself, yeah, I'm in trouble here because the thing that I felt most was safe. For all the jokes I was making about him, going to murder me, I actually felt very safe. And right towards the end of the date, and it had gone dark and it was very romantic and the candles were there and I'd been laughing and drinking champagne, obviously on my own. He said, right, I've got one more surprise for you. I thought, oh dear. And I said, it's been going so well. Go on. So this is where, you're going to murder me. He said, I need you to close your eyes. And so I closed my eyes. And then from further away than I'd expected comes this loud voice shouting at me in Welsh, turn around now. And I turned, and there was a firework display just for me. And I thought, I mean, honestly, I couldn't believe it. It was amazing. And he came back over, and I said, Annette, listen, this is all really impressive. But if this is our first date, where do you go from here? And he said, well, you're going to have to hang around to find out. And it was 10 days after, this is no word of a lie, 10 days after that first date, he asked me to marry him. And I said yes, because I knew I was going to. And that is how our relationship started. We actually kept it a secret, that we were engaged. I think we managed to keep it a secret for about 3 months. And people thought we were nuts. When we announced that we were getting married, and we got married then the following December. And we were just very happy in this little bubble and getting on with it. And on the day of our first anniversary, it was one of his cousins who wasn't trying to be offensive at all, but actually said to me, oh, you did the right thing then. And I thought, yeah, actually, I hadn't even thought about the fact that there were lots of people probably going, oh, this is a recipe for disaster. And of course, that was 12 years ago. And he really is, without a doubt, the kindest, I'm going to go, human being I have ever met. He is kind and thoughtful and clever. And these are just, the tip of the iceberg of why I love him. We've been through a lot in the last 12 years, and he really has never, ever let me down. So I'm glad that I said yes to the job.
I'm so glad you said yes to. What an amazing first date. I mean, fair play. Can I ask you, I can feel the enormity of love that you share. But you said right at the beginning, I didn't think this chap 10 years younger than me could actually teach me anything. And it turns out he could. Tell me, in terms of how he's shaped you in the last 12 years, what has he taught you about yourself or about relationships that has stood out profoundly?
I had never met anybody who was so comfortable in his own skin. Never. And I have spent so many years of my 54 on this planet not being comfortable in my own skin. And so to be around somebody who, and I can say this confidently because, friends and family have seen this, who celebrates me every day. And, in the last 12 years, meeting when we did, I'd just turned 40, he just turned 30. So they're both really significant times in your life, And to deal then with the things that life throws at you as a couple, to feel confident with that kind of energy by your side, with that kind of calm strength that everything is going to be okay, has been, it has been life-changing. So of course it was always going to be Aled that I would choose, because he really has had a profound effect, on who I am. And he feels the same. He jokes that if he hadn't met me, he'd be dead or in jail. I don't know whether that's true, but there's definitely, I think, although there are 10 years between us, we're actually in the same generation. And so a lot of the time, because we do laugh every day, and the things that make us laugh are usually that we have the same references in life. So he was brought up in the Rhondda, I was brought up in Aberdeen. We both have family from West Wales, well, specifically Pembrokeshire, both of us. And so there's so many things about the way he was brought up and the way I was brought up that are familiar and comfortable. And so we can giggle a lot at things that possibly don't make sense to anybody else, because although they are 10 years, there's no time at all, none at all.
Did he know that you were going to talk about him today?
Yeah, he did. I told him. Yeah, and he was really surprised. I think probably he might have thought that I would have chosen my dad, who is, a huge character. He really is. And I'm very fortunate that he is still a huge living character in my life as well. And I will be mentioning him when it comes to the place that I've chosen. So I think that possibly he thought I was going to choose dad, but no, it was Alec.
I think it's a perfect choice for you. And, when I think about you as a couple, he is such a bear of a man, isn't he? And to hear you talk about the protection and the laughter and the love that you have, 12 years on, it's a rare find in this life to have a love like that. It's not every day you find that. And when you do, you hold on to it like a precious jewel. And it's fine to cry, by the way, because there's not an episode that goes by the way, that I'm not biting my lip and holding back the tears. This has been so lovely. Oh, to your beloved Aled. Okay, let me go on to your place, if I may. Where have you chosen?
So the place that I've chosen is Patagonia. I'm going to take you back to 2001. And I was not in a good place back in 2001. I had just moved home to mum and dad's after and during one of the most traumatic chapters in my life, after a relationship breakup. And I was not doing well. I wasn't coping well at all. And looking back at it even now, there are days and weeks, and I'm sure there are lots of people who can identify with this, where I just don't remember. I think I was just going through my days zombie-like. I really was. I managed to get some supply work in a local school. So so it occupied my brain really. And I would find the strength to get up and get dressed and go to school. And then every lunchtime, I would drive home and Dad would make me lunch. And my father this is very my father. My lunch would kind of land on the table as I was coming through the door of the kitchen. I know. And my father is a character. So my father, I thought it was entirely normal to grow up with a father who would recite Shakespearean soliloquies and Dylan Thomas poetry around the place. Entirely normal. He is the one who's told me as I was growing up that my soul, imagine this, my soul walks the beaches of Pembrokeshire when I sleep. I really was never, ever going to become an accountant. So, ever. And so he also worries, and he was very worried about me. And I couldn't even entertain worrying about him, worrying about me. I was just in this terrible place. And I was having a very, very bad day. This one day, was awful. And I'd managed to get to school, but every single hour was tough. And I came home, and as usual, my lunch was being prepared for me. And I can remember catching my breath before going in because I needed Dad not to be 100% dad and chirpy as he is and all the rest of it. But he opened the door and said, "Did you know that the first submarine to ever be invented sank off the coast of North Wales?" And I thought, oh, dear Lord, this is it. My breakdown is not going to come about because of this terrible breakup. It'll be from one of my father's stories. Today I cannot. Anyway, I sat down. I sat down at the table, and he puts the food in front of me, and on he went. He continued. He was on the roll. Yes, he said. Well, they've decided. I was reading in the paper this morning. They've decided to find it and bring it, and kind of retrieve it. I said, "Have they, Dad? Really teetering on the edge here?" And he said, "Yes." And he sat in front of me and he said, "And do you know the name of that submarine?" And I said, "No, Dad, no, I do not." And he said, "Resurgam. Do you know what resurgam means?" And I said, "No," feeling petulant, And he grabbed my hand and he said, "I will rise again. And you will rise again, Merchi, my girl." And I collapsed. I broke down over my salmon. I really did. But I left that lunch, Debs, and I listened to him. I really did. So, he is rather brilliant. He is rather brilliant. 3 days after that, I just believed, after 3 days of hearing Resurgam and Wacky Dad's story about a submarine, I just suddenly had to believe that I would rise again. I would. And 3 days later, I was sitting in my sister's lounge and I was reading the Western Mail. It was a Saturday. I was reading the Western Mail on a Saturday. And I saw in the kind of the job ads, there was a little advert and they were looking for Welsh teachers in Patagonia. And as soon as I saw it, I knew it was for me. I knew that there would be lots of other people who would see that advert, but I knew it had been sent for me. And I got it. I got the job. And so 2 months later, I flew, and it was very hard to leave my family because I was still feeling very vulnerable. But I knew it was going to save me, and save me it did, because whenever there are any features or pieces in paper online about Patagonia, I always want to say, "Oh, shush, don't tell everybody. Don't tell everybody how magical it is," because it's hard to explain. There is something there. Somebody once told me that it's got something to do with the ley lines, that it is genuinely a very healing place. And it was for me. It really was. It takes a long time to get there. And again, when I landed there in the summer of 2001, and it was in the winter because it's the Southern Hemisphere, I traveled all that way, and I felt like I'd arrived home, and it changed my life. It changed my life completely. And I was definitely not the same person. When I came home, I was a very different me.
Tell me about the landscape of Patagonia, and tell me about the people, if you may.
Oh my goodness. Well, so I don't know whether you know how much you know about the Welsh community there. So there is a Welsh community, which is amazing and has been there since 1865. So the fact that you travel all this way to this place that is very different, of course, to Wales, because it's an enormous country. And and the winters are very wintry and the summers are very summery, and but they have the most beautiful blue skies, and the people there, um, I know, I'm sure there are one or two who are a bit grumpy and nasty, I'm sure, but that was never my experience. There is something so magical about, and particularly, I think, the descendants of those first Welsh settlers. So in 1865, there were 150 Welsh people who, took the chance to better their lives. They wanted, because they were unhappy with what was going on um, politically and religiously in Wales at the time. And they were given a chance to start what they thought was a little Wales beyond Wales. And so 150 really brave. I mean, in 1865, even imagine. Um, and so the fact that it was Patagonia for me, that I was following the footsteps of these people who had been so brave, and I was feeling, very, frightened. I'd been in a state of feeling frightened for so long and so vulnerable. So there was something so fitting to me that that was the journey I was making, albeit in a far easier way than the poor souls who left on a clipper ship called the Mimosa. And they left in May of 1865 and didn't actually get to Puerto Madryn in Patagonia until the end of July. So they had been on board and endured many hardships along the way. But the people, the descendants of those first Welsh settlers, they still speak with such admiration and love and gratitude for those first brave souls that made it out there. And Mam came and stayed with me. She'd never ever been on an aeroplane, particularly, and not long haul before. And she came out to stay. Dad is a whole other podcast about him and his and his claustrophobia, so he wouldn't have made it. But she came to stay with me, and she said at the time when she came out, so this is in 2001, I took her over to meet a lot of the people I'd met who had taken care of me and who had just taken me in and were just so beautiful and kind and, just exactly what I needed. And Mam described it as feeling like her childhood in the 1950s. She said it has that feel that you can walk in and out of, somebody's kitchen and there are people speaking to one another and they have time to do that. So it was just amazing. I'd teach. So I was teaching people who wanted to learn Welsh, who weren't from the Welsh community. And then I taught my absolutely favourite group were the Welsh, it was kind of a Welsh chatting group. And there was a fabulous character. Everybody in Patagonia knows of him because he was a very respected musician called Clydwyn ap Eiron Jones. And he was fabulous. And he had a glint in his eye. And he used to come to our kind of chatting group. And he was in his late 80s then, And so I would have these out-of-body experiences sometimes where you're chatting with Clydwyn, and then out of the window, you can see southern right Wales, and their tails coming out of the sea. And you think, oh yeah, I'm not in Aberdeen. It was my version of, not being in Kansas, Toto. It was just amazing. Amazing.
Do you know, as you're saying this, one of the things I love about doing this podcast is my bucket list, my wish list to travel just grows and grows. In fact, I'm ticking one off later this summer when I go to Galway on the back end of a episode from series 1. And I'm sat here now going, when can I go to Patagonia with Lily? I've got 2 pieces of artwork in my front room downstairs that the actor Matthew Rhys photographed on his adventures in Patagonia. And I look at these black and white, beautiful photographs of that he took, and I journey there, I suppose, in my front room almost every day. And it's just dawned on me that, this it was a pilgrimage you took, and it restored you, and it's brought you hope. How long were you there, by the way? How many months or years?
I was there for a year, but then they couldn't get rid of me, so I kept going back. Yeah, it is quite an amazing place, but don't tell anybody.
I won't tell a soul, just the whole community that's now listening to this,
Yeah.
but we'll keep it on the down. Thank you. What an amazing choice. I love that you brought Patagonia. I wasn't expecting that. I was, for some reason, anyway, let's move on. Let's go now to your treasured possession. What have you chosen and why?
This, as I said at the beginning, this was far easier, thinking about profound impact. So again, story time, kids. I had just returned to Wales from Malaysia. I'd been living and working in Kuala Lumpur for a number of years. And I came back. I actually didn't want to come back, but my sister, rather inconveniently, only went and had, my niece, Millie, and I wanted to be around her, I really did. And so I came back to Wales. And at the time, I'd been doing, Malaysia is a very hot, humid country. I was really quite fit, I suppose, for somebody who was, approaching 40. And I'd been doing lots of walking and all of this. And because I was so near turning 40, there were 1 or 2 things that I had on my bucket list that I wanted to do while I was still 30-something. And one of those things was I wanted to, probably because of Sarah Jessica Parker, wanted to do a flying trapeze. As luck would have it, I put it out there, and I went into Cardiff a few days after writing this list. Honestly, I kid you not. And the fabulous No Fit State Circus were advertising for a 10-week flying trapeze course. I could not believe my luck. I thought, done, tick. So I was off, I tottled, and I wasn't quite flying through the air with the greatest of ease. We hadn't got there yet. But we were on the lesson where we had to sit on the, the swingy thing. I have all the technical terminology. We're sitting on the swing, on the bar, and we had to shuffle back and lean back, and then put one leg and round, the rope and do whoop, and then the other leg whoop. So I shuffled, I whooped with that leg, and then I whooped with that leg, and my leg kept going. And there was a crash mat, thankfully, underneath me. And there was, like a pantomime gasp. And the guy who was kind of training, I can remember him, I wasn't in pain, by the way. The guy who was training me said, yeah, that's not meant to happen. And I thought, no shit, Sherlock. Because I was looking at a part of my foot I'd never seen before, Anyway, they helped me down gingerly, I think is the right description. And they're all waiting now for me to scream out in pain for something to happen. And all I did, because I thought it makes sense, I stood up and kind of did a little bit of a whoop with my hip. And everything seemed fine. Put on my flip-flops and sashayed out to there, thinking, yeah, I'd better check that out. And check that out I did. And the following week, after much kind of joking from my GP saying, oh, it's probably your age, it's probably, arthritis, went for an x-ray and found they thought that possibly I had been walking around for at least, they thought, about 4 years with no cartilage in my hip at all, in my hip joint. And because of the heat in Malaysia, and it turns out, which is a bit of a poison chalice, that I have a very high pain threshold, all the usual signs that your body should be going, you want to check this out, things aren't, great here with your hip. I found myself at 39, not flying through the air with the greatest of ease, but getting a hip replacement. And so my treasured thing, is my bionic hip. That is what I've chosen. And the thing that got me through, because I was on a ward, as you can imagine, I was 39, everybody else around me had a collective age of 582. And they were so amazing. They were such characters, God bless them. And whenever, because I was so determined to get out to there, and the thing that kept me going was I had a map of the world. And I mentioned, returning to Wales from having done this kind of 6-month solo trip to celebrate turning 40. It was in my hospital bed with my new hip. That is all that got me through. I kept on looking at this map and planning my trip. And, I wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. I really did. And whenever I did anything, there was a chorus of ladies going, oh, here she goes. Oh, and she marvelous. Because, I was practically willing myself to run on this new hip. And so I left, that was in the February. And then in the December, I launched myself and my new hip at the world to celebrate turning 40, not with a rucksack, but with a bit of a posh wheelie kind of suitcase, and a photograph of my x-ray, because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be sending airport, security whatsits off. They're going to be bleeping all over the shop. So I had my x-ray on my phone as well. Yeah, I got frisked quite a bit on my travels. I can't be absolutely sure that they were always working for the airport.
I just think that is the most brilliant choice of treasured possession. So if you were stripped of all of your belongings, the bionic hip is what you're taking with you. And well, you have to. It's well and truly locked inside.
I'd really worry if it wasn't with me.
Sara Lewis, I don't know where to begin. This has been extraordinary. You have made me howl, sob, think, ponder, and literally, I love you with all my heart. Thank you so much for being a guest on These 3 Things. And there we have it. A huge thank you to you, our listener. We are growing our community and kindly ask that you be a valued link in this chain. For These 3 Things to exist and continue, we need you to please press subscribe or follow now. You can do this on your preferred podcast platform. We will keep you updated on all our community news, and you'll be the first to catch all new episodes. A rating or thoughtful review is greatly appreciated and helps others to find our show. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of our treasured community.